Hello, everybody. My name is Gilda Ross. I'm the Glenbard Student and Community Projects Coordinator. I'm delighted that you are here with us for this another very important GPS presentation. We'll be talking about the full range of anxiety, everything having to do with school to school refusal as well. Also, our ask of everyone is please do share this resource. We like to say that GPS is to help everyone of every age thrive, no matter where you live. So join us in sharing this opportunity. I appreciate that. Thank you to the sponsors. And one of our sponsors is helping us out today, and that is Endeavor Health, who brought us Dr. Laura Koehler. So I hope you'll join us again in sharing this excellent resource and thanking our sponsors for all that they do. Quickly, I'd like to tell you about upcoming events before we get started. So next week, today is more of a serious topic. Next week, we're going to laugh a little bit, and we're going to invite Melinda Wenner Moyer to talk about her book, How to Raise Kids Who Aren't Assholes. Yes, that's the title. And we're calling it How to Raise Teens You Want to Spend Time With. That's next Tuesday, noon and 7 p.m. And then there will be another important program for parents of high school students, The Price You Pay for College, an entirely new roadmap for the biggest financial decision your family will ever make. Ron Lieber will be with us on Thursday, November 7th at noon at 7 p.m. to also answer all of your questions. He is the Financial Times. He's with the New York Times. He's their financial editor. Going into the rest of the month, we've got an in-person event on Wednesday, November 13th, with all of the best buddies that are out there. And then we will be welcoming Dr. Cara Alamino around her book, Over the Influence, Why Social Media is So Toxic for Teens and Young Women and all of us at any age, and how to limit its impact. That's on November 14th. The month concludes with a visit from David Sheff, and we'll be talking about Beautiful Boy. The father and son will be joining us along with Jessica Leahy. So, as I said, today's more serious. Next week we'll laugh, but let's get started. Introducing today, and I'm delighted that she's here with us, is Dr. Amber Quirk. She is the Regional Superintendent of DuPage County. Amber, take it away.
Thank you, Gilda. I'm always honored to be here. Bring in just amazing people to help inform us. And I need to mark my calendar for that November 14th one. That sounds really great. But today I get to introduce our author, Dr. Laura Koehler. And she is a licensed clinical psychologist with Endeavor Health Linden Oaks. Dr. Koehler has worked in the mental health field for more than 10 years in a variety of settings, including community mental health, private practice, and residential treatment centers. Her work is focused on helping adolescents and their families, and her approach to treatment integrates dialectical behavioral therapy and acceptance and commitment therapy, DBT and ACT, along with exposure therapy to provide patients with the skills that they need to increase their ability to regulate their emotions as well as tolerate overwhelming emotions. She writes an ongoing blog for Endeavor Health, and it's titled Dr. Koehler's Healthy Driven Blogs. And we are delighted to welcome her to this GPS Parent Series today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited to be here. So we will go ahead and jump in. I'm going to share my screen here so you can see the PowerPoint. Okay, can you guys see the PowerPoint?
It's on the presenter view. There you go.
All right, awesome. So we are here and excited. So today I'm going to be talking about anxiety in general and using school as an example of when anxiety comes up, as well about some school refusal. So our objectives for today, we are going to be looking at just the purpose of anxiety, how it relates to school, trying to recognize and understand when you might be seeing some anxiety in your child as well as yourself, and develop a skills action plan to manage anxiety in a healthy way, and then learning some specific coping strategies to help reduce anxiety in the moment. So we're going to start off with just talking about anxiety in general, about how to recognize it and understand it. And so the definition of anxiety is an anticipation of a future threat. And so, in general, anxiety serves to motivate us. It motivates us to act, to move, to do something. And then it also protects us, which is one of the reasons then it helps motivate us, is because while it's trying to protect us from harm or an unpleasant consequence, which in schools could also include social side of things. Um, and then helping to motivate. So anxiety is a common human experience. We all experience it. It's a basic human emotion. We all have it. And it is by one of the most common illnesses in America. So if anxiety is something that every single person has, and we all experience it, how do we then know when it becomes an issue? When does anxiety just turn into then an anxiety disorder? There's kind of three main pieces to that. So one is that it interferes with our daily functioning. And so meaning, especially in a teen world or a child's world, if we're struggling, daily activities for a child should be going to school, doing their homework, spending time with family and friends, doing their hobbies, maybe joining clubs or activities or sports at school, maybe doing some chores around the house. And so when we're looking at what are these daily activities, and then if your child starts to perhaps stop doing one of them or is reporting that it's very anxiety provoking, they want to quit something and it seems like it's coming out of nowhere, that might be a sign that sort of traditional anxiety becomes an issue. Last beyond the difficult circumstances is number two. And so a lot of the times we'll experience anxiety with doing things like speeches or tests. Maybe there's a brand new club at school and we're going to go see what it's about. And then we get very anxious about it, which is typical. A lot of people feel anxiety about doing new things. But then perhaps even when the test is over, then that anxiety about that test can last like through the evening, maybe even the next couple of days. So even when it's beyond, when the circumstance is over, when the event is over, and that heightened anxiety is still there. And then it then can start to occur in everyday situations where there's no factual threat. So then what can happen is that the anxiety part of our brain is doing this like what if scenario. Well, what if this happens? What if that happens? And so now there's not this actual threat that's in front of us. And again, a threat could be something that is that unpleasant consequence, or we think something bad is going to happen, and then now it's occurring in situations where perhaps it wasn't occurring before. So, for example, maybe your child hangs out at neighborhoods friends houses all the time, and has been for years, and now is finding a lot of anxiety with going there, but maybe before it was just when it was the new people, but now it's showing up with things that they've done before, everyday situations that occur. So those are kind of three things that you could look out for, as well as then again how to know when anxiety turns into a disorder. So here are some common anxiety symptoms. For me, one of the things that I think can be difficult about anxiety is that, as you can see from this slide, there's lots of symptoms. So I could line up 10 kids in front of me and they would all experience something different, which sometimes can lead them to think, really, us as humans, can lead us to think, no one else experiences this the way you don't have anxiety the way I have anxiety. And it is different, but it's still this overarching anxiety. So the body responds with that fight or flight system that happens, a lot of us, a lot of the kids have learned in school. I have a 9-year old, and so my 9-year old has even heard about this in school. And so all of these symptoms can occur because that fight or flight system gets activated. And so why some choose, so again, if I'm lining up 10 people, one kid might have a really bad stomach ache, another kid gets really bad headaches, another person just feels like there's something sitting on their chest and they can't breathe, another person is very fidgety and can't sit still. So again, it can look different, and kind of why that occurs is a little bit of like a genetics ish, as well as just growing up, other people, being in the environment, things like that. But there is a cause for every single one of these. And one of the things that I have found to be very helpful with working with my patients, as well as, again, my own son and myself, is knowing why these things are happening. So I could probably do an entire hour presentation on just anxiety symptoms, but I'll give a few. And so some of the ones that in my experience have really surprised people is like blurred vision or distorted vision. Sometimes that will occur as our anxiety starts to raise and that fight or flight starts to get activated. Of, is there a threat here? I'm not sure. Then what's happening in those moments is that because the anxiety part of our brain is concerned that there's a threat there, our eyes start to dilate. So that we can hone in on what this threat is. So if I was walking at night in the dark and perhaps hear a noise, I want that to happen. If I'm driving my car and it's snowy, I want that to happen so that I can see. Well, the struggle comes in is when it's a test. There isn't this like actual threat that's in front of you, but a test is still going to bring up the same amount of things, because having that idea of, if I don't pass this test and I don't get this good grade, is that going to affect college? And kind of have these things, which is where then that threat comes in. It's not this immediate threat the way that, like, driving on an icy road or walking at night and someone being there is this immediate threat. But the anxiety part of our brain knows that that domino effect can happen, and that in five more steps, perhaps this could be like threatening to who I am as a person, or what I want to do in the future. So then what ends up happening is that if it's like a test, or a speech, then the eyes just end up getting blurred because it's just going in and out with trying to focus on something. Another example that shows up a lot for us that we see are stomach aches. That I see that a lot, and so why that's happening is because, again, that fight or flight. So the anxiety is getting ready to either fight or to run away. So it wants all of the resources as much as possible to go to our arms and our legs so that we can fight or run away. So then what happens is that all the resources that are not necessary for survival, then gets all those resources get moved to our limbs. So our body stops digesting or slows down digesting food. And so, which then that quick can cause a stomach ache and even cause us to go to the bathroom sometimes, because it just is going to slow down digesting, because we don't need to digest food right now to survive. And then the arms and the legs need more. But again, if it's a test, if it's trying to walk up to someone to introduce them for the first time, to try to make a friend, to join a club, there isn't something to fight or to run away from. And so then it can just create this stomach ache that's happening, because our brain is still going to show up evolutionary wise the same way it did 100 years ago. Our brain is still kind of the same. So that's why sometimes that stomach ache can happen, as well as, for that same reason, is another area that is not necessary for survival, is creating saliva. And so then if we start to climb our anxiety scale, I'll call it a ladder probably a few times, but an anxiety scale, we stop creating saliva, which can create that very dry mouth, or your throat feeling very dry, closing in and hard to swallow, because we don't need to create saliva in order to then, to um, survive in that moment. But again, the anxiety part of our brain doesn't always understand the difference between this immediate threat in front of me, as well as then like this future threat down the road. Of, what if I try to introduce myself to someone and they ignore me, or they just walk away, and then I start to feel that embarrassment. That there's a lot of research out there that social belonging, especially like I mean, really for all humans, but really with school age children, that social belonging is very important. And it's really a part of like a survival piece, because of belonging in school, like a high school, a grade school, can kind of mimic some of the same things as being like physically threatened in this moment, because being ostracized by your group, can be very difficult, for all of us. Really, I just think there's more opportunity for that to happen in schools. So there was just a few examples. But every single one of these, there's a biological reason why every single one of these happen. And the reason that I think this is helpful is because, um, being able to know, like, okay, I know why this is happening, sometimes can just help us in that moment right away. Some of the sources of anxiety, there's a lot. So again, this is why sometimes it can feel like no one understands me, because I haven't met someone that sort of experiences the same thing. But new situations or transitions, so going from grade school to junior high or middle school to high school, having your teacher go on maternity leave, any kind of new situation is a source of anxiety. Worrying about the judgments from others, or any kind of like interpersonal communication type situations. Academic difficulties, some of the things we see here, at Endeavor Health Linden, at Linden Oaks, in the anxiety and OCD services, is grade schools academics were a lot easier, and then something happens in junior high, middle school, and high school where it gets harder for them, and that can be a source of anxiety. Worrying about the future or loved ones, if they had any kind of trauma, anxiety can kind of be secondary to that. Worrying about anxiety, we see that a lot too. I worry about having a panic attack, I worry about getting anxious in front of other people. Bullying is another source of anxiety, specific fears such as vomiting, and then worries about like medical conditions as well. So there's a lot of sources of anxiety. But again, we're looking at all of these are probably going to, for the average person, is probably going to bring about anxiety. And then it's when it crosses the line to that anxiety disorder and kind of interrupts our daily functioning. Some signs, some things to look for, again, is those physical sensations, because when that anxiety starts creeping up, that those physical sensations are going to join it, as it should. Again, as our anxiety goes up, our fight or flight system's getting activated, so then those physical sensations are going to happen. So we really kind of want to normalize that. I kind of am on a quest to normalize that physical sensations are going to come with anxiety, and we want to be able to open up and expand to that. Frequent trips to like the guidance office or the nurses station or nurse's office, wherever it would be in your school, like leaving class a lot, losing interest in extracurricular activities or hobbies, so that you realize they haven't picked up their musical instrument or haven't drawn, they're very much into art and they haven't done any kind of crafts or art for a while. Struggling with concentration and focus, retrieving information, seeking reassurance. We see that a lot too. So sometimes acting out and irritability can show up, or being quiet. Again, anxiety is tough because it has a large spectrum. And then, engaging in unhealthy coping or avoiding situations where maybe they experienced heightened anxiety in this situation once, and so then the brain is like, I don't want to do that again, and so now you might notice them avoiding those situations. So some of the things to look for in your child, or even ourselves. Again, I know that a lot of you are parents, and you're probably coming here to look for anxiety, symptoms and things to do for teens. But we get anxiety too, and watching your child be anxious or unsure about something is very anxiety provoking. So you're going to hear me say a lot that these are things for us to do too, because it's just all of us as humans experience anxiety. And so it's actually going to be helpful for your child. The more that we can keep ourselves calm and we can role model that, one, anxiety happens, and two, it's something that is typical when we're living a full and meaningful life. And if we can role model that and then show some problem solving, that's going to help a whole bunch too. There's kind of four primary reasons, why that sometimes the anxiety can get so intense that then we end up refusing to go to school. There's four primary reasons for that. And the first one is those any kind of like experiences that are unwanted. So that is going to be I'm avoiding school because I don't like stomach aches, I don't like headaches, I don't like feeling tired. Sometimes we can kind of get into this culture, this attitude where, I don't go to school if, we all have this file in our brain that we won't go to, that we wouldn't go to work, we wouldn't go to school if I had 102 fever. And sometimes what can happen is that file can get quite long. I don't go to school and I have a stomach ache. I don't go to school, if my anxiety kind of like gets above a 5, it's on a scale of 1 to 10. And so that's the first one. And then to escape some sort of negative, like social situation. So this can be a lot with like speeches and group work, raising your hand in class. All of that seems very overwhelming. And so then they don't go to school. And sometimes it can be for like a positive reinforcement, for things such as attention or sympathy. So this could be like the separation anxiety. This was something that I experienced when I was in 5th grade. My mom was in a pretty bad car accident, and then I developed separation anxiety, and I wanted to be with her all the time. And so then it's not so much that I didn't want to go to school as much as my mom wasn't at school. So then I didn't want to go to school really just because I wanted to be with my mom more. Then this fourth one, a fourth reason why sometimes kids don't go to school is more like tangible rewards outside of school. That's typically not anxiety related. That's typically more of, I don't enjoy going to school, or I don't see the value of it. So then I'm kind of choosing not to go do other things instead. So it's really those top 3 that have more of an anxiety base to it. So that's kind of a background with anxiety. So I hope some of that was helpful to get a better understanding of just what anxiety looks like, and how it's experienced, and why it's important to have. We need it. Again, it helps motivate us. So now we're going to talk a little bit about developing the skills action plan to manage anxiety in a healthy way. Because again, we're going to have it, and it's always going to show up at, some of the things we talk about here in the anxiety and OCD services is kind of the other things that sometimes might bring up anxiety. Like if we're going to go to a job interview, those are things that are gonna create some anxiety for us. Choosing a college, these are things that are anxious, that should be anxiety provoking, because they're things that are important to us. So this is a frame that uses dialectical behavioral therapy and acceptance and commitment therapy. So DBT and ACT, I'm going to talk about that a little bit. This is a frame that it can be used, that I guess a few reasons why I like it so much is because this is a frame that I use for myself. I think it kind of crosses over age. I think that kids can use this, as young as 7, 8, 9. Again, I have a 9-year-old. I use this with my 9-year-old. I think this is a frame so you can use for yourself when you're feeling anxious. It's a frame that you can use to help your child, and then it's a frame your child can use too. And so that's why I like it so much. I don't think that we necessarily need to be like, oh, I'm adult, I need a different frame, because it's just anxiety. And so this is what we call a skills action plan here, in the anxiety and OCD services. We have all these skill action plans, and this is kind of this general overview of a frame to sort of help, something that we can keep with us, hold with us, to help us in the future. So there's kind of 2 primary components. One of it is like regulating your emotions by setting you up for success, and then using this STOP skill. It's an acronym that you can see here, like slow your breathing, take note, open up, pursue values. And those 4 steps is what's really going to help manage when that anxiety shows up. So first, we're going to just quickly touch on setting up your day for success, because this is really the key to it. A lot of the coping skills that we learn when we're experiencing some intense emotions is really just helping us survive that emotional experience. Setting up your day for success is really what's going to make the big long-term differences to building tolerance to feeling things that are uncomfortable, and even outside of anxiety, like feeling tired, not feeling good, like if you have a cold. Those are 2 big ones that we see here, that then can create this anxiety because it's so uncomfortable to go to school feeling tired, or having a headache, or again, not feeling well can then kind of create the secondary anxiety where then all this anxiety shows up. So none of this is probably going to be a surprise to you, but really taking care of our body, that's going to be like step one. So making sure we're sleep well, eating well, getting
Okay,
active.
thanks. Bye.
These are just the things that are really going to be helpful. Knowing what's important to you, knowing the why. So being able to identify for your child, why is it important to go to school? What is it about it? So what kind of student, friend, teammate do you want to be? Because if we are a committed, responsible, hardworking teammate, and I'm a part of a team, then I need to go to class in order to do that. Accumulating positive experiences. So, doing things on a daily basis, little things all day long that sometimes can help us with this recovery piece that we're going to talk about in a minute. But making sure sometimes when the anxiety gets really heightened and then it kind of stays there, so on a scale of like 1 to 10, like a 5 or a 6 stays there, then what can end up happening is that everything becomes about the anxiety. And again, we stop doing those hobbies and interests. But the thing is that hobbies and interest is one of the things that's going to help us regulate and be able to manage that anxiety better, that when it does show up, when you have that test, when you have to do that group project. So making sure that we're just doing things throughout the day that can be helpful.
Dr. Koehler?
Engaging in oh yes.
1 second. There is a notice that says app Zoom is sharing your screen. Do you see that on your slides?
Yes.
Can you hit hide?
Yes.
There we go. Thank you. Sorry.
That's okay. Thank you. So then making sure we're engaging in meaningful activities. So again, this is a little bit more about building that sense of competence and accomplishment. That's really important to maintain our self-esteem. Is showing ourselves that we can do hard things. And then again, recovery throughout the day. That's just going to be really important. That if we're having like a tough week at school, we got a lot of stuff going on. We want to try to make sure that if our anxiety on a scale at 1 to 10 is getting up to like a 7, that we want to do things to recover to like bring us back down to like a 2 or 3. So doing some calming activity, maybe gratitude moments, things like that. But however it would help to recover throughout the day. Sometimes I use a metaphor of like a gas tank, that we want, kind of like our energy, our emotion gas tank to be nice and full. And what are things that help you kind of fill up your gas tank, so that way you can keep going all day long, and then you're not exhausted by the time you like get out of school for the day. So just real quick, why this is so important is because when we don't do all of these things, then we have a higher chance that our emotions are going to intensify very quickly, be on be kind of have it occur all day long, and then take a really long time to recover from it. So the more that we're regulated, the more that we're doing all those things we just talked about on that last slide, we're going to then be more regulated, which then means we're going to climb up that ladder a little bit slower, that scale a little bit slower. So then we're going to have more time to catch things. But we are still human. We're still going to do things that are anxiety provoking, maybe like having to give like a 5-minute speech in a class. That's a classic one that a lot of people feel anxious with. So we might still get that intense anxiety, but then it's going to happen just a short amount of time and recover quicker. So then that anxiety will only occur or that heightened anxiety will really only occur during the event, during the situation, and then we'll be able to recover really fast. And this can really be helpful to show too, again, that anxiety really is a part of life, and we really want to learn how to manage it, really like almost become friends with it. So then that way it's helping us rather than hindering us. So then this frame, this stop skill that I mentioned before, to then manage when the emotions show up. So that now this is the point that anxiety is showing up. We're doing everything we can to balance our emotions with all those other things, but as anxiety still shows up, it's these four primary steps of slow your breathing, take note, open up, and pursue values. But the very first thing we want to do is stop. That's one of the reasons I like this acronym so much, because that fight or flight system is being activated. Then our mind wants to be like, go, fight or flight, go, do something. But if we know there's no like immediate threat happening right now, we want to stop that urge to act immediately, because big emotions may just suggest to act without thinking, because again, it's going into this survival mode, and we need to be able to identify sort of when there's an immediate threat, and then when there's not, we want to just like stop for a second and then slow your breathing. And the reason we want to do this, because it really helps ground us in the present and really helps calm that body. So, like I was saying before, that fight or flight, with all those resources going to your arms and your legs, you're typically, you start, your heart rate starts to increase and you start to breathe heavier, because again, you're getting ready to go. So then slowing our breathing down helps that body stay calmer, so that reaction isn't happening as quickly. So this is why I'm saying this is helpful for us too as parents, because when our child is in distress, we're going to go in fight or flight mode too. There's terms out there you go mama bear. That term is because really what's happening is our fight or flight, and my survival of my child is just as important as survival for myself. So these are things that I use for myself with my own patient, my own child, as well as my patients here. Is slow your breathing, helps you get calm, helps really activate what's called the parasympathetic nervous system. So that fight or flight is that sympathetic nervous system. It's getting ready to go. And breathing activities have really been shown in research to activate that parasympathetic nervous system, which is reducing emotional arousal. And so we want to be able to pause so that we have time to think and get unstuck about what's going on. Here's an example of four square breathing. It's a classic one. I chose this one is because here at Endeavor Health Linden Oaks, this is where our patients' absolute favorite, hands down, the adolescent and child program, hands down, this is their favorite because it's just so simple. So it's easy to remember. So it's 4 seconds in, breathe in for 4 seconds, hold it for 4 seconds, breathe out for 4 seconds, hold it for 4 seconds. And then we want to do that several times. And so this is really helpful to help us gain a little bit more control of our breathing. So we've stopped, kind of slowed our breathing, which just really gets our body in check, really tries to help us not get into that high system of that body going. So then we want to take note of what's going on. So we want to see, where are we, what's going on, what situation. So then we can start to gather information. So then we know why, and then we're going to know how to respond then. So then we're just not acting impulsively. So we want to sort of notice, if we can, what are our thoughts, what are our feelings. This is just one example of a scale you could use. You can use colors, you can use numbers, you can use words with your child to identify some sort of communication that you guys can work together. Here we kind of use 1 to 10. 1 to 5 sometimes can just be a little bit easier. There's just less options. Who's involved, what's going on. But it's really hard for us to make effective choices when we don't know what's going on and what we should be doing. But being able to have some sort of communication about what does 1 to 5 mean, or what do these words mean, these colors. So we can even simplify this a little bit more and be like green, yellow, red, like a stop sign or stoplight. So, green, I'm good. Yellow is like, I'm starting to feel some anxiety, some of those symptoms going on. Red is, I'm experiencing some high anxiety. And so then that way because sometimes what happens is like, well, what's going on? And I'll ask my son and he's like, I have no idea. And then we'll be like, okay, let's slow down. Let's look at this. Where are you at on green, yellow, red? That's what I use for my son since he's 9. I just use something that's a little simpler. He knows what a stoplight is, and then we can create this language that we're both experiencing, or both being able to understand. So then I know what green means to him, yellow, because my definition of anxiety, as we talked about earlier, is very different than my son's, is different than my husband's, and so I want to make sure we're all on the same page. So taking note. Then we want to open up to it. This one can be really hard. Being able to open up, acknowledge that it's there. It's really hard for us to build tolerance to anxiety if we're not willing to feel it. So we kind of need to open up to it. Our emotions communicate with us. What is it trying to tell us? What am I worried about? What am I worried about? Is this negative consequence that's going to happen? And that the goal is to survive emotional experience by riding the wave. None of these skills are really, the goal isn't to make the anxiety go away because we need it. The goal more is to identify what is it trying to say, open up to it. So then that way, one, I know it, I can experience it. So when I'm going as 16, 17, 18, 19, however old you are, going to their first job interview, they can say, I know what this is. I know what this is. And some of you might have younger children like myself, but as you know, time goes fast and they're going to be teenagers and they're going to be young adults before we know it. So if we can prep them now and really build that tolerance, so then that way when they go off to college or start working, or they, want to propose someday, they're like, I know what this is. I know what it's trying to tell me, and I'm going to be ready for it. Then we want to pursue our values. So we need to know what those are. So what actions are aligned with my values? Values is just a word that's used in DBT and ACT, those type of therapies I talked about earlier, to really hone in on, this is what a full meaningful life looks like. This is how I want to show up. I want to show up engaged and present with my son. Those are our values, things I can really never check off the list. Thinking about what choices are going to make this situation better or worse, not what's going to make my anxiety go away. That's not the question that we really want to focus on. We want to redirect our attention to, in this moment, what's going to make this situation better or worse. And then we want to have a skills kit. We call it a skills kit, crisis kit, handy to help. So a small makeup bag, a pencil bag, just something small that you can put some skills in. So then that way we're ready to go. If it's at home, you can use like a big box. But sometimes, we'll have these coping things that we've heard about, fidgets or, coloring. But then, we have to go find it. Where is it? I don't know where this thing is that I really like, that really helps me. If we just keep it all in one spot, it can be really helpful. So we're going to talk about a few of these. So now we're going to learn some coping skills to reduce anxiety. Again, it's for us, it's for them. So here's 10 what I call life skills, which is what DBT and ACT calls it too. Life skills for low to moderate size emotions. We really want to pull those apart and really kind of save crisis skills for when we're higher on our scale, on that anxiety scale. So these are things that kind of we can practice all the time. 10 skills, and really with DBT and ACT, there's a lot more. Really, these are probably the 10, I would say, top, 10 favorite from here with our kiddos here. So taking 10 belly breaths are sometimes really helpful. There's that 4 square breathing we talked about before, but taking 10 nice breaths from your belly can be really helpful. You want to, as you breathe in, your belly to, get pushed out, and then when you breathe in, belly push out. When you breathe out, belly then goes back down. And you want to do that at least 10 times, if not more. If someone, if your child or yourself is having a lot of racing thoughts, a lot of what if thoughts that are just tumbling, you can imagine like bubbles, like that kids play with, kind of, and you could actually do this too, like get a little thing of bubbles and start putting, breathing through the little circle and having the bubbles go, and then telling your child to like imagine like pulling out your thoughts and like putting them into a bubble, and then letting that bubble kind of take it away. And what's kind of fun about it again is that you could use real bubbles if you have the ability to do that, and so it can be fun for like the younger kids as well. And then imagine family and friends. That can be really helpful for separation anxiety, or if kids, their number one, sometimes here we'll have like their number one skill is their parent, and their parent can't be here in program. You can't go into class with them. So sometimes like imagining them, so imagining that they're like sitting behind you in school. You got to face forward towards the whiteboard, but imagining that they're there with you. Notice 5 items in the room that you've never noticed before. Something that's gonna kind of take your mind. Again, if you're a thinker, like I'm a thinker, it'll take your mind and what's actually present, what's happening right here and now. Let's get you out of your mind and kind of like into the room and notice. Look around the classroom and what are 5 things you never noticed before. Or, if you're sitting out in the parking lot and your child saying, I can't go inside, I can't go outside, you can play with what are 5 things about the school property or something in the car that you've never noticed before. Listening to calming music can be really helpful, or even like upbeat, positive music too, depending upon what's going on. And then doing in the perfect world, like doing a dance party, something that's really going to help can do that. Writing with the opposite hand, it can take a lot of concentration to write with the opposite hand. And so again, kind of trying um, to get present is like just random sheet of paper, write your name, or write some lyrics to a song, write every character of Pokemon you can think of. You can tell I have a 9-year-old, right? And but doing it with the opposite hand to help hone in and focus that concentration. That's what a lot of this is about, is directing your attention on where we want to go, almost like imagining your mind is like a spotlight, and putting it where we want it to be, rather than the anxiety just taking everything over. um and then, I have drop anchor twice on there. I'm just noticing. I apologize for that. So drop anchor, and these next three we're actually going to expand on a little bit more. So rainbow grounding is a favorite here. It's really just looking around the room and finding objects that go with the color of the rainbow. And then, of course, you could always go beyond too, of like, and you could use number set too. What are 5 things that are orange? And if you're with your child, you can race. I'm going to find things that are orange faster than you are. A lot of the times, don't ask if they want to do it. A lot of the times the anxiety is going to say no. Let's do this. That's what I'll do here. If there's a patient that's struggling, I'll be like, let's play a game. We're going to have a race. Let's see who can find the 3 things that are red. Who can find those first? And then 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 is more using your senses. So kind of, again, looking around the room, 5 things you can see, 4 things you can hear, 3 things you can touch, 2 things you can smell, 1 thing you can taste. But all of it is about taking the focus off of our mind and our body and trying to get into the room, which is where we're at. Your senses, your breathing, what you can see and hear and feel, that's happening right now. So it's getting us out of kind of focusing on that anxiety and trying to focus on something else. And then dropping anchor kind of pulls some of our stuff together. So it's acknowledging the discomfort, because again, that's really important to building tolerance, as well as then, having that, us controlling the anxiety versus anxiety controlling ourselves, and then connecting with your body. And this is one of my favorite ones, because again, a lot of the times with that physical sensation, that fight or flight, we're starting to like get into this mode of running away, and we want to push our shoulders back, kind of sit up straight, stretch those shoulders back, put your, feet on the ground. A lot of times we have a tendency to curl up. We want to open ourselves up. And what that does is our mind and our body are connected. And so then if our body sort of isn't taking that fight or flight stance, it's going to send signals to our brain that we are actually imminently safe. So right now in this moment, maybe there are some what ifs and some worries about the future, but right now we're safe. Kind of the ultimate way is just to do a full on like starfish stretch, and then engage in what you're doing, what's happening in the here and now. So what, if that's the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, things like that. So those are 10 life skills that you can use all the time, anytime, really, just to help you get you present. And then here are 10 crisis skills that can be used for big emotions. So that's more on a scale of like 1 to 10. That's going to be more of that like 8, 9, 10 zone. So if we want to try to change our body chemistry quickly, an ice pack is an example of that. And so if you are at home and they're doing their homework and they're getting super stressed out, and maybe they are starting to panic, you're going to get some ice packs, and then you can put it on the back of their neck, and put it over their eyes. And what that does is it's that the cold can be a little shocking to our senses. And so then it can distract us from that, using our senses. So then all those worries, are the resources are going to like, whoa, this is really cold. Intense exercise. So going for a walk is okay, of course. But if we really want to change our body chemistry quickly, intense exercise can be really helpful. That fight or flight system might be getting activated. So there's a lot of energy ready to go so that we can run away or we can fight. So a way to expend that is to do 15 jumping jacks, something like that. We're going to talk about a progressive muscle relaxation in a minute. Pace breathing is one that can be helpful, where you're kind of that you would have to do this one ahead of time, where you're identifying what is kind of the natural breathing pattern. So four square breathing is one that we're telling someone. Pace breathing is more of like finding out what is your natural breath. Maybe it's 5 seconds in, 3 seconds out, and then that's what pace breathing is. And the reason why this is helpful in those big intense emotions is because of some with the heart racing and breathing heavier, it's we're not breathing the way we normally do. Pace breathing is trying to breathe, and like especially with kiddos, you'll be, if you say breathe normally, they're going to say I don't know what that means. Where if we gauge it ahead of time and just sort of count when we are calm, we'll know what that is. Some ways to distract the mind: word searches, extreme dot to dot, Sudoku, any puzzles like that. Counting backwards by 3 is a great way to distract. We're going to talk about the ABC game a little bit. And then there's self-soothe. So that's a lot of times using our five senses. So like maybe reading an encouraging letter from a family or a friend, having any kind of fidget, something. Again, all those resources are going to our hands. So something to do with our hands can be really helpful. And then like mindfully eating like a favorite snack. A progressive muscle relaxation is a great way to really reduce the anxiety in the moment. So the goal is to release the tension in your body. And the way to do that is that you can start at your head and move to your feet to your head, and just start with the muscles. So if you're starting with your feet, you would start by like tensing your toes on the in breath, hold it, and then release the muscles on the out breath. Then move up to your ankles and tense your ankles on the in breath, hold it, release on the out breath. And moving up to like your knees and then your thighs, and just keep moving up until you're tensing everything and then releasing it. There's lots and lots of research that shows that a progressive muscle relaxation can be really, really helpful. And then the ABC game is hands down the favorite here. It's when you pick a theme and then you choose a word that begins with that and go through the alphabet. So, for example, this is like for animals. It could be like alligator, bear, cat, dog, elephant. But what's cool about it is that someone can do it on their own. So your child could do this by themselves, go through the alphabet. They could take a piece of paper, while they're sitting in class, and just A to Z and do it there, because there's, endless options. You could do names, you could do stories, you could do video games, characters, just so many things. But one of the things that's helpful too is that for parents, we can do this with them, so we can all do A, you do B, I'll do C, you do D, and we can like go back and forth. If, three people are there, it's like person one does A, person two does B, and then you keep going around. And it just can be a really distracting way to really help us, because what's happening a lot of the times, a lot of these kind of mind distractions are helpful because our mind only has so much resources. So if you imagine that, there's kind of 10 main domains of our mind, is that as the anxiety is rising, those are all like going over. It's like anxiety, 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 so maybe only like one is kind of noticing what's going on, and all the other resources in my mind is going to this anxiety. And playing the ABC game is going to slowly start to pull over those resources then to more being present, more engaged, more here, and less to the anxiety. So then, maybe by the time we get to like M and N, then we're, only half of our brain resources is now kind of being taken over by the anxiety. And so then that's kind of why a lot of these mind distraction techniques like word searches and the ABC game can be really helpful, because of all of that what if thinking that a lot of times happens with anxiety. And so that is the last one. Here's a few books that we recommend. They've gone over pretty well. This is all dialectical behavioral therapy and acceptance and commitment therapy. So if you like a little bit about what I said today, these are 3 books that can help you with that. And then And then books for kids as well. These are a little bit more like workbooks. The illustrated happiness trap. So on the recommendations for parents, the happiness trap is just like a book you read. It's very short. It's helpful. And then the illustrated is set up like a comic book. So Russ Harris, who wrote this, kind of set it up to look like a comic book, which can be fun for kids. And then there's 2 workbooks as well, which is nice for kids too, because then they can like practice and do it with them. And that is the end of my presentation. And so now I'm going to stop sharing and answer a few questions.
Thank you. Thank you. It's excellent. So much information. So you've got counselors here, many in high school, and you've got parents, and we're going to go and talk to our teens too. What do you think they need to know about school refusal? What don't they know that they need to know?
I would say the one of the things is that it can happen very quickly. I think school refusal can happen, and very quickly. They can, they're in 8th grade. They've gone to school for 7 years, and now they're struggling in 8th grade. But one of the things that, especially if your child didn't struggle as a young child, we have evidence that they can make it through an entire day of school. So if the anxiety does start later in grade school or even junior high school, we have all of this evidence to know they have the tolerance. They can go through an entire day.
Excellent. Is there something specific about girls versus boys?
I don't know any specific research here. We see both girls and boys. I think we've seen girls a little bit more with the separation anxiety thing. We see boys a little bit more with OCD. But I'm not sure what the actual like research shows. I just know what we see more in like our community.
Interesting. Amber, I know you have a question.
Well, there was one in the chat, so we'll go with that one. So also, I
Yeah.
just wanted to say thank you for all the reminders about the breathing activities. I remember the 4 square breathing I actually learned from a social worker when I was an assistant principal. And thanks to Beth, she was the one who taught me when you're actually with children to do the breathing with them. And
Yes.
I've used that on my own daughters. And to be
Great.
honest, they've used it on me now that they have learned it.
I
So
love
that's
it.
good. Yeah, because I sometimes get a little anxious. So I think early on you kind of talked about, different activities that could cause people to be anxious. And somebody had
Yeah.
asked, what do you do if the meaningful activities are the ones, it says, what do you do if the meaningful activities become or are a main source of the anxiety?
That's a good one. I think that the first place my mind goes is that the anxiety might be showing up because it's meaningful and important. So because these are the things that make our life full and meaningful, sometimes anxiety can show up because of that. And so sometimes making meaning behind where the anxiety comes from can be helpful. And then perhaps trying to problem solve the specific, if we can get at what like those specific triggers are about that event. Like for example, because I don't know what the example is for this person, but if it's like clubs and activities and they want to join an activity but they're really anxious about it, can we ask a friend to go with? Even if they're not going to join the club just for like the very first time, could they go with? So a way to try to like problem solve the specific things that happen. If it's more of like, let's say a musical instrument and now they're getting to this point of advancement where it's very hard, do they need to have an instructor, a teacher at this point to kind of help them because maybe now they can't do it on their own anymore? So just trying to problem solve those things so that we don't avoid them. And then knowing that the anxiety is probably showing up because it's important.
So kind of the second part to that, they asked about if you're overwhelmed by having too many activities, which I appreciate what you
Yes.
kind of just said about the
Yeah.
music in our house. It's a lot of
Yep.
sports in school. And
Yep.
how do you honor your commitments and not make yourself overwhelmed? So how do we kind of help each other as
Yes.
parents?
I think
with
there's,
this?
yeah, for sure. I think there's 2 points to that because one, I think there's in this present moment, ooh, I signed up for too much. and I do value commitment and I do value responsibility. So sometimes it's like, how do I get through this season? And then it's, let's not do that again for next season. So there's kind of like this longer term that we might have to make some hard choices, because like my son like lots of sports, and we can't do baseball and soccer like he did when he was 5. And so, we really had to make a conscious decision. We sat down, we talked about it, and he chose baseball over soccer. And then in this moment, though, I think that it's like, this is why I'm here to because I'm committed and because I want to be a good teammate. I know I overextended myself this season, so then making sure that we're getting those like recovery. If we happen to have like a rain out of a baseball game, then making sure we're going off and doing something fun to refill our gas tank, I think can be really helpful. And I think talking to your like coaches or the instructors, the teachers about, hey, we overextended ourselves, but we really don't want to give up on this, and what can we do? How can we help that?
So sorry, is it okay, Gilda, if I jump
Yeah,
in again?
no, no, go ahead, Emma. That'd be great.
As some of you may or may not be aware, our office helps support truancy, which can be related to school refusal. Sometimes it starts that way, and we try to get students reconnected with services because often we know that there's some other barrier that's there keeping them from school. And one of our participants talked about their son is a straight A student, but doesn't want to go to school. So before it gets to a truancy issue, what do you recommend to parents? Like, what would your suggestion be in a situation like that?
Great.
That's a tough question because the
know,
first
sorry.
place my mind goes, what's that?
I said, I know, sorry.
Yeah, no, that's okay. The reason it's a tough question though is because the first place my mind goes is that sometimes, because if it's a student that they know is working hard and wants to get those straight A's and super engaged, sometimes the first instinct from school and parents is to give like a little slack, and that it's okay, like if they miss school. And so if we can, the first thing I would do, is for him or her to understand that, like, if you miss school, you might not be able to make stuff up. And so if we're kind of interested in getting A's, we got to go to school to keep doing that. Because the anxiety part of our brain is going to say, if I don't have to go to school and I just get to do my work at home and still get straight A's, why go? Why deal with all of that anxiety? If I don't have to, I still get straight A's. And making sure that they're getting natural consequences that the district would have, and not kind of giving them special treatment because they are engaged students. Does that make sense?
It does. It does. Mm-hmm.
There's some great questions here in the Q&A. How does a
Yeah.
parent know the difference between anxiety and defiant behavior?
For the first place my mind goes is that usually anxious folks will one talk about it. Not that they'll always talk about, maybe they don't always understand how to put words to it, but oftentimes defiance tend to be a little bit more sly, a little more sneaky, where the
Mhm.
anxious folks might say things like, I want to do it, but where the defiance isn't so much. A lot of the times defiance kids often don't stay home if they're refusing to go to school or struggling, and anxious kids do because it's safe at home. Of course, it's not this, black and white always, but in general, that's a way to kind of notice the difference, is that, they'll say things like, I want to go to school. It's just because of XYZ that I can't.
Mhm.
Where perhaps the defiant kid is more like, I don't want to go. Things like that might show up a little bit
Mm,
more with someone
mm,
who's
mm,
defiant.
mm.
Like, well, like they don't, they'll like, sometimes we've had kids come here and then they'll say, well, I just don't like school because it's boring. And so then maybe they need to be challenged a little bit more. Maybe it's because they need to be more in advanced classes.
Another really good question here, about, so there's some physical ailments the night before, and you want to
Yeah.
support your child. and you know that there are circumstances that so many, as you said, so many children suffer from. It's bullying or a million other things. So you
Mhm.
want to support them. How do you let them know you're supporting them without ignoring them?
Yeah, I think a whole lot of validation with a lot of ands, you
Mm,
know. So yeah, that, the things that I'm hearing from you is that it's like really tough. Your stomach's already maybe starting to hurt. Thinking about going to school to, like, let's say, have to interact with someone that is a bully or someone they don't get along with well. So acknowledging that the stomach ache is there. I believe you. The stomach ache is absolutely there. And, part of that is because, with a bully, you might be feeling a little threatened. So then that's why that's happening, is because that stomach ache, that fight or flight that we talked about before, is starting to show up. I think even younger kids can kind of understand why that's happening. And we can still go to school,
mhm.
and I can, we can still interact, and then maybe create a plan, of course, with the school involvement, but being able to, go down to the counselor's office for 5 minutes, if the stomach aches really bad, just to get some water, with stomach aches and things like that too, making sure that they're eating breakfast before they go to school and making sure they're staying hydrated. I think that can really affect stomach, like, just, that can sometimes give us symptoms too.
Yeah.
Is that we haven't eaten or drinking anything yet today, so making sure that
Mhm.
they're getting, some drinking water, and then food, as well as having some space to absolutely talk about it, but creating a culture at home that we're not going to talk about it like all night long.
Mhm.
I heard you.
Mhm.
I think we're getting to the point where we're
Mhm.
repeating
Mhm.
ourselves. We're going to
Mhm.
do our skills, but like right
Mhm.
now, let's read a book together, or,
Mhm.
let's play the
Mhm.
ABC game real quick.
Mhm. Mhm. Mhm.
My son, just recently, in about a week ago, was having nightmares, and he was going to bed, and he said, when I close my eyes, that image kind of like pop, that picture, I think he said, pops back up. And so we played the ABC game, but with things in his room. Instead of like picking a theme, we were looking around his room, and then that distracted him enough that then he was able to like go to sleep. And so being able to, I not like in that moment, I acknowledged it. Oh man, having those images must have been really scary, or using words that they've said, that you just, there's no reason for us to reinvent the wheel. Like, what word do they use? And then say, and, like, I feel like talking about this actually might make us a little bit more scared about it. So let's do, something different, so then we can distract ourselves from it.
You've got a great question here. Such you gave us such wonderful calming down activities. What if my child refuses to try them?
That's a good question. Sometimes I think because there was really a lot of skills. I just kind of gave 20 off the
Mhm.
bat. So I think sometimes it's like finding the ones that are helpful,
Mm,
for them. So having them be a part of it can be really helpful. And depending upon the context, like, skills that they use at school aren't always ones they can use at home. So maybe they really like basketball. So if they are doing homework, and you take a 10-minute break and go outside and play basketball, so having, including them on, well, what can we do, I think can be helpful. And then on, like, kind of the other end of the spectrum, sometimes if you're not worried about their safety, you can say, hey, I'm here for you. I'll practice the ABC game. We can go for a walk. We can, things that they like. We can do a breathing exercise together. And if they're like, no, 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 I'm here for you. So when you're ready to practice skills with me, I'm going to be here and ready to do that. That's kind of the other end of the spectrum of, then just, being there for them, but then, not going on and on. Again, it's still, like, to me, giving attention to the anxiety if we're just keep talking about the anxiety. So we are really only, like, we want to reinforce the behavior that we want to see, which is doing your homework or like practicing skills. So then we don't want to give a lot of attention to behaviors we don't want to see, which then, might be this, no, I don't want to do that, then, I'm going to let you sit here. And then when you are ready, we'll be ready to go.
I love that. So more attention on the positives, less attention on the negatives. Don't mind for failure when they walk in the door. It must have been a terrible day. That kind of thing is what you're saying.
Right, right, right.
Mhm. And I love what you said about be a curious scientist, without a lot
Yeah.
of tell me more. Oh, that's so interesting.
Mhm.
And I loved what you just said about sitting with them in the discomfort. And someone said, sit with them on the bench. And they may get up off the bench before you do, but let them know that you're
Mhm.
there. You're going to solve it together, right?
Yes, absolutely, absolutely.
Closing words, Amber, for our distinguished speaker today.
I think just thank you so much for being here. So much of
Yeah,
this
you're very welcome.
resonated with me as a mom and as somebody who tries to support students who are anxious across our county. So thank you. And it's nice to see you virtually because I know we've been in a few meetings in person.
Yeah,
So this was great.
yes.
And to those of you that are here with us, again, let someone know about GPS. And this is where we go hug the kids. So thanks, everybody. See you next time.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
And someone asked about this, about some of the other programs coming up on depression and anxiety. Yes, always, always coming up. But also go to the YouTube channel and look for the past events that are there. There's huge library of resources. Thank you so much, Dr. Kohler. Thank you, Amber. Thank you,
Thank
everybody.
you, Gilda.